Nirvana Prakarana, the Transcendence, Chapter 10, The Story of Shikidhwaja, Part 1. Trapped in the hollow of the mountain were the clouds coating with its shoulders. The hollow was like a great cup shaped by Mother Nature over eons of patient work with the help of wind and rain. The wall of the cup was the mountain itself, thick with vegetation of variety of plants including bamboo. Myriad of birds made these trees their homes, while the animals, so-called wild by man, roamed about free and without fear, following the principle strictly of live and let live. A youth sat on the rock, apparently catching his breath after the strenuous climb. The truth, however, was that he was trying to compose himself. There was a strange anxiety eating his vitals. He was on his way to the cave in which Bodhidharma, the 28th patriarch after Kashyapa, the direct disciple of the Buddha, lived for the past 9 years. Huiko, for that was the name of the youth, had seen him 10 years back when he was only 12 years old. Emperor Wuli of Liang area had made preparations for the grand reception of this venerable man. The whole population, well almost, was there to receive Bodhidharma, and when he finally arrived, there had been peals of laughter from the people. The man had appeared with a shoe on his head, a shoe which is fit only for the feet. The emperor had asked him the reason for his humorous behavior. This act is symbolic of conveying that the intellect is subservient to the experience in spirituality, to show that both intellect and shoe are at par. Strange as it may seem, but the saint had refused to answer. Instead, he had remarked that he was sad with his long journey from India had gone waste, for it appeared no one was eligible for what he had come to give. Bodhidharma had walked away to this mountain and chosen a cave to sit in seclusion. Then the stories had started, that he sat with his face to the wall of the cave, that he had refused to talk to anyone who went to seek his audience, and when even the emperor had gone there to seek his pardon and instruction, Bodhidharma had said that his communication with the wall was better, at least it was incapable of misinterpretation. Huiko, however, had been unable to forget the fire in those eyes and the expression of determination characterized by the firmness of the chin. He knew that he did not have any logical explanation for his feeling, that Bodhidharma had something invaluable to offer to mankind, and he wanted to try to seek it from the patriarch. Almost all who had come here earlier had failed even to see the face of the saint. He had left his home to try his luck. Nay, not only try, he thought, but he must succeed. Else, he got up. And if someone who had been there during the reception 10 years back, someone who had seen the fire in the eyes as well as the determination on the chin of Bodhidharma, could not help but see the same spirit in this youth. But this mountain slope and forest covering it responded only with a strange, receptive and potent silence. Nothing else but the cave remained in Huiko. It was as if everything just vanished out of his mind and consciousness. He did not know how, but he found himself standing, looking at the straight back of the patriarch. Rays of the morning sun entered the cave and fell on that back, casting shadow on the wall, covering it completely, appearing to represent the gigantic being of Bodhidharma. Taking a deep breath, Huiko declared, "I have come." There was no response, only a deepening silence. With the machete he had brought to clear the path in the jungle, he cut off his hand and tossed it for the patriarch to see. He thundered, "If you do not turn, you will be seeing my head next." Huiko thus became the torchbearer of Chan tradition, which came to be known as the Zen on reaching the shores of Japan. Unless one has such preparedness for the truth, so much so that even the life becomes insignificant as compared to truth, one cannot possibly achieve it. An event in the life of Sri Ramakrishna is worth remembering. Sri Ramakrishna had spent sufficiently long time in devotion of Mother Bhavatarini at Dakshineshwar. The sadhana had almost come to a boiling point, but he failed to have the vision of the mother. Every evening he would tell himself that one more day has been wasted in vain without the vision of the mother. When the pain became excruciating, he started feeling the uselessness of it all, even his life. One day, as he entered the sanctum sanctorum with such a feeling, his eyes fell on the ceremonial kripanam, a weapon with a carved blade. He rushed and took it off the hook to cut off his own neck. It is said immediately Sri Ramakrishna had the experience and he was lost in it for many days. What really happens with such preparedness is explained through this story of Shikidwaja. Spirituality in particular, and religion in general, has always stressed the need of renunciation. The idea is that unless one gives up the lower, one cannot achieve the higher. And it's very rational. The mind indulges more strongly and is more active and restless at the lower or grosser level than in the higher or subtler. To avoid such indulgence and involvement, renunciation is considered to be mandatory. Hence, every religion, directly or indirectly, advocates renunciation and self-control. For most of us, these two steps are like the two wings needed for flight spiritual. But when one has trodden the path for quite a while, these very steps can become hurdles. This too has been dealt very beautifully in the story. Another most important aspect is Chitta Shuddhi, or the purity of mind. As it is commonly understood, Chitta Shuddhi is taken to be a state of mind devoid of impure or violent thoughts, and having such thoughts characterized by noble feelings like compassion, love, and devotion either towards a chosen deity or concepts like nation and society or humanity. The impure mind is responsible for all the evils existing in the society. Education tries to inculcate the social responsibilities of the citizens. How far it is effective is an entirely different question. Vedanta has an entirely different perspective of Chitta Shuddhi. This again has been illustrated through this story. Returning to this story, Sage Vasishta continued, King Shikidwaja, lost in illusion, gave way to grief due to the enormous wealth he had acquired. He felt as though he was enveloped by a great forest fire. He gave away various rare gifts in charity, undertook pilgrimage to holy places, and observed religious practices. And yet, he was not free from the load of grief in his mind. Approaching his dear wife, Chudala, he poured out his heart. He said that after experiencing everything, he had no love left for his sovereignty and wealth, and he desired to proceed to the forest. That in the forest there was neither pleasure nor pain, danger nor wealth to haunt those living there. Leading a noble life, he no longer wished to associate himself with the regality, and that Chudala should not oppose him if he had come to a point of changing his residence from the palace to the forest. This again is a natural development. When one has indulged too much with the worldly activity characterized by sense gratification, hunger for name, fame, or power, one gets satiated to the point of misery and swings towards the opposite direction of sense restraint or withdrawal. If one is positively involved with the world earlier, one starts getting negatively involved through dislike or even hatred. That is how we observe some persons observing celibacy, nurturing hatred towards the opposite sex. Indulgence and involvement cannot possibly bring about any lasting peace, and man cannot rest until he gets peace. Chudala replied that like the flowers blossoming in spring and fruits in autumn, the karma begins to fructify in due course. If the body becomes old and starts dropping, then the desires also fall, at which time forest is a fit place. The king, she said, had still not come to that stage. She argued that he should not go because it appeared as if he was not yet ready. But the king had already decided and asked the queen not to stop him. And as she was still young, she should not follow him. Instead, she should look after the kingdom with the help of able ministers, as a good queen should. Having retired that evening, he performed his Sandhya Vandanam and slept quietly by the side of Chudala. When she had gone into the lap of mother slumber, Shikidwaja stole out into the dead of the night, unperceived by her, instructing his attendants that he was going on a round of the city alone and asked them to be where they were. He departed from the town. Bidding farewell to his enslaving possessions, he entered the forest, crossing many rivers and hills in course of 12 days. At last, he reached the inaccessible forest on the slopes of Mandara hills and made his abode in a Parnashala or hut of leaves beside a tank full of scenic beauty. There he performed rigorous tapas consisting of rituals and japa. Chudala, sleeping in the palace, awoke and not finding her husband, inferred that he must have retreated to the forest, abandoning his kingdom as he had declared. She resolved to find out the whereabouts of her husband. She sprang forth in her subtle body, went up into sky, journeying through the air. Seeing her husband travelling in forest with a bright sword in his hand, she meditated as to what course she should pursue and came to a conclusion that she should see him only after his desires and hatred had ceased. Accordingly, she returned to the palace. She informed her subjects that the king had gone to a certain place for some private work and wielded the scepter alone for 18 years with true justice. She ascertained that no one felt the king's absence through her noble deeds. Shikidwaja was leading a hard life, devoid of any comfort, subjecting himself to long fasts. Chudala, assuming the subtle body, visited him and seeing his emaciated body was filled with compassion. She knew that she could confer on him Atma-jnana at that very moment, but knowing that her husband could never accept it from his young wife should she appear in the present form, she decided to assume another form suitable to accomplish the end. She knew that after prolonged tapas, Shikidwaja was in a receptive state. Changing her form, Through dhyana, she descended from Akasha before her husband in the form of a young Brahmin. The king rose immediately to pay respects to the Brahmin with a lustrous form. Showing a seat beside him, he saluted. Reciprocating this salutation and taking his seat, the guest commented on the genuine humility of king for abandoning the kingship and all the regality associated with it. This comment from the guest surprised the king, who wanted to know his name and purpose of his visit here. Chudala, in the form of the young Brahmin, told the story of his birth. Narada was sitting on the bank of Ganga, absorbed in meditation, and was in a strange transition from samadhi and normal state. He heard the sound of gaiety and laughter. Directing his gaze in the direction, beheld the heavenly nymphs Rambha and Tilottama playing in water. Seeing them thus alone and not ashamed of their nakedness, his mind got agitated and experienced sensual desire showing itself in his mind. Controlling himself totally, he released the seed into an embryo of a crystal pot. The embryo grew, and through the grace of Narada, the son was born, who was taken to Brahma the Creator. Beholding his own grandson, Brahma helped him to attain the goal of Brahmajnana, immediately calling the youth Kumbhamani, as he was born in a kumbha or pot. Continuing, Kumbhamuni said that noble Saraswati is his mother and Gayatri the aunt, he always accompanied by the four friends, the Vedas. A doubt creeps into the mind of the reader as to how enlightened Chudala could create a mythical story of her birth. But this is how all egos are born into the limitations. Just as the limitless space is contained in the pot, Narada not only refers to the divine sage who is associated with the stories of gossip, devotion, and moral and ethical codes simultaneously, but it is humanhood in general. The expansive reality adopts the limitedness through identification of desire. Saraswati and Gayatri represent speech and mind respectively, and the four Vedas, wisdom in general, both secular and spiritual, that are always available to an enlightened person. Kumbhamuni wanted the king to narrate his own background and his present state. Shikidwaja told about his own life and renunciation and his subsequent penance. However, he confessed that he was far from enlightenment. On the contrary, he said, he had become more miserable, converting the elixir of life into poison. To which Kumbhamuni said that there cannot be any true bliss unless jnana is instilled into a disciple by the preceptor. All the acts of tapas are only diversions to waste time. For those without true jnana, action alone is a security against the restlessness of the mind. The virtuous action helps only to remove impure vasanas. If the vasanas are destroyed, then birth, old age, and death will have no effect. The vasanas arise due to lack of awareness can be overcome through Brahma Bhava, or the conviction that everything is Brahman, and Prajna, or awareness. One must question, who am I? Whence came the universe, and into what it is absorbed? Guru alone will be able to guide the receptive disciple into vichara. Shikidwaja was moved by these words of Kumbhamani and said that he was in that solitary forest, having left the company of men of wisdom in his kingdom. He had realized his mistake, But since the Muni was present in the forest with him, could he not be accepted as his disciple? Kumbhamuni replied that he can enlighten the king if he concentrates his mind, which was restless at that moment. King assured him that he was at that time in a receptive mind and had implicit faith in the words of the Guru. Muni demanded that he should not be interrupted and started narrating a story.